You've got to understand something powerful about economics and how it applies directly to your life. Anything that is easily available loses value, and anything that is rare becomes sought for and precious. That's not just some theory from a finance textbook. That's the law of value in action. You take gold, for example. Why is gold so expensive? Not because it's shiny. Soda cans, it's because it's rare, it's protected, and it's not found just anywhere. And the same principle applies to you. If you make yourself overly available to everyone all the time at any cost, you're not being generous. You're diluting your own value. See, you were created with divine purpose. You were created to solve problems, to elevate situations, to carry a message, a mission, and a movement. But if you're always saying yes to everybody who sends you a text, everyone who wants a piece of your time, everyone who wants your energy, your attention, your resources, you're not just exhausting yourself, you're teaching people that you come cheap. You're teaching people that access to you doesn't require honor. It doesn't require alignment. It doesn't require intention. That's dangerous, not just for your personal growth, but for the impact you're called to make. Now, here's what I want you to grasp on a deep level. The more accessible something is, the more people take it for granted. That's why people will scroll past hundreds of motivational quotes on Instagram, but will pay thousands to sit in the room with someone who lives those principles and speaks with authority. The same wisdom, but one is rare and the other is common. And when you make yourself too common, always available, always reachable, always responding, always rescuing, you're mismanaging your own calling. You're giving out your most valuable asset, your presence, without requiring a return. Let me break this down in practical terms. Your time is your life. Every time you give someone an hour, you're giving them 60 minutes of your destiny. And when you do that freely, without discernment, without boundaries, without prayer or purpose, you are leaking life in places that aren't producing fruit. You can't be mad when people overlook you if you've trained them that you're always on standby. You can't expect to be honored if you haven't set a standard. God doesn't bless chaos, He blesses order. And part of divine order is guarding the gift He placed inside of you. And God prays, God blesses protection. God prays that you are the God. God prays that you are the God. God prays that means learning to say no. That means being okay with disappointing some people so that you can fulfill your mission to others. Think about elite professionals. Whether it's a world-class coach, a master surgeon, or a high-level consultant, they don't let just anybody book their time. You need referrals, you need alignment, and sometimes you need money. Why? Because their time has value. But for some reason, we don't apply that same principle to our own lives. We feel guilty for setting boundaries. We feel selfish for protecting our energy. But let me tell you, boundaries are not barriers, they are bridges to purpose. When you protect your access, you preserve your anointing. When you limit who gets your attention, you multiply your impact for those who matter most. Now, I'm not saying be arrogant. I'm not saying isolate yourself. I'm not saying think you're better than everybody else. I'm saying know your value and stop throwing pearls before swine. Even Jesus didn't stay in every town. He didn't heal every sick person. He didn't chase people down for approval. He showed up, spoke truth, healed where he was led, and then moved on. Why? Because his mission required movement, not people-pleasing. Some of you are stuck in cycles of exhaustion because you're more committed to being available than being effective. Let's look at your relationships. Are you constantly the one giving advice, encouragement, money, help, yet no one is pouring back into you? That's not love. That's not service. That's spiritual malpractice. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And if you're always available to people who never invest in you, you'll look up one day completely drained, wondering why nobody values you. They don't value you because you haven't required it. They've gotten used to the version of you that never says no. But the moment you pull back, the moment you shift your focus inward to become more valuable, watch how the atmosphere changes. See, when you reduce your availability, you force people to consider the cost of access, and that's when respect begins to grow. You're not being rude, you're being strategic. You're aligning your life with divine principles. You're creating space for clarity. You're eliminating distractions. You're focusing on what God actually assigned to you, not what everyone expects from you. And that's a powerful shift. When you protect your value, you position yourself to be used in greater ways. The energy you used to waste on low-level distractions becomes fuel for high-level assignments. The time you used to spend saying yes out of guilt becomes intentional investment in your growth. The emotional energy you used to give away becomes spiritual capital that you can use to walk in purpose with boldness. But none of that happens until you decide, I will no longer be easily available. I will no longer operate at a discount. I will no longer compromise my mission just to stay connected with people who don't value it. This is not about cutting people off. It's about cutting off access to anything that dishonors your purpose. Some people aren't bad. They're just not called to this season of your life, and that's okay. Maturity is knowing who you're assigned to and who you're not. Value is built when you become selective. Access is earned, not assumed. And when you start living like that, your life will reflect it. You'll begin to attract higher quality opportunities. You'll start seeing divine appointments, not just random requests. And you'll feel the difference in your peace, in your clarity, and in your progress. Value is not in being everywhere, doing everything, pleasing everybody. Value is in alignment, excellence, and discernment. You were not created to be available to everyone. You were created to make impact in the right places with the right people at the right time. That is how you honor your calling. That is how you grow your value. Most people spend their lives chasing something they think will make them feel whole, chasing attention, chasing approval, chasing validation. They say yes when they should say no. They show up when they're exhausted. They stay in rooms where their spirit is shrinking, all because deep down they want to be accepted. But that desire, if it's not rooted in purpose, becomes a trap. It's a trap that will have you becoming available to people who don't value you, tolerating environments that drain you, and forgetting who you are in the process. The problem is not that people don't value you. The problem is that you've been chasing validation instead of building value. When you chase validation, you hand over the control of your identity to other people. You wait for them to approve you before you act, before you speak, before you move forward. You let their applause or their criticism determine your pace. And the moment you do that, you've already compromised. Because now you're no longer living from your internal conviction. You're living from someone else's opinion. And people's opinions are fickle. One day they love you, the next they forget your name. If your sense of worth is tied to their reaction, you will always be unstable. But when you flip that thing and say, I'm done chasing validation, I'm building value, you take your power back. You start investing in yourself. You start mastering your gift. You start walking with intentionality. You stop trying to be liked, and you start aiming to be impactful. And here's what happens. When you focus on building value, validation starts chasing you. People begin to recognize your worth, not because you demanded attention, but because you demonstrated substance. Value is attractive. Value draws people in. Value creates demand. You don't have to scream for attention when you walk in the room carrying something that can't be found anywhere else. Look at the way the world works. The most valuable companies aren't the ones that beg for customers. They're the ones who solve problems at scale. The most influential voices aren't the loudest. They're the clearest, the most consistent, the most credible. When you work on value, you work on becoming someone who matters. You become someone whose presence brings transformation. That's why some people can charge $10,000, 0 cents for a 1-hour consultation. It's not because of the time, it's because of the value packed into that hour. They didn't arrive at that level by chance. They built it. Now let's apply that spiritually. Jesus didn't go chasing the crowds chased him, not because he was trying to be famous, but because he carried something of value: healing, truth, authority, love, wisdom. He didn't water down his message to be liked. He didn't compromise to fit in. He stayed true to his assignment, and the people came. That's a divine principle. When you walk in alignment with who God created you to be, you become a magnet for divine connection, not a beggar for human approval. So many people today are tired because they're overextending themselves, trying to prove their worth to people who still won't see it. And it's not that the people are evil. It's that you're trying to get something from them that only God can give. Validation is addictive when you haven't established your identity. But when you know who you are, when you've spent time in the secret place building spiritual, emotional, and mental value, you stop performing. You stop explaining yourself. You stop apologizing for being focused, for having standards, for not being available to everyone. Your life starts moving in a direction of purpose, not popularity. And let's talk about what it means to be valuable. It's not just about skills, it's about mindset. It's about habits. It's about your spiritual posture. Valuable people know how to think critically, how to manage their time, how to build relationships that align with their purpose. Valuable people don't show up just to be seen. They show up to serve. And service that flows from authenticity is irresistible. When you stop trying to look valuable and actually become valuable, your presence becomes undeniable. You don't need everyone to recognize your greatness. You just need to walk in it. That's what makes a person powerful. When you know you carry something special, you don't give it away cheaply. You're not arrogant. You're aware. And that awareness allows you to operate at a higher frequency. It allows you to say, no, I can't be there, or no, that's not the right fit, without guilt. Because you're not looking for validation from every invitation, you're looking for alignment with your assignment. There are people who are talented but undervalued because they haven't built the courage to withdraw from environments that exploit them. They think availability is proof of humility, but that's not biblical. Jesus had boundaries. He rested. He went away from the crowds. He spent time in prayer. He told people no, not because he didn't love them, but because he understood the weight of his assignment. If you want to be valuable, you have to steward yourself like you're carrying something divine, because you are. Start investing in your growth. Read, learn, train, pray, prepare. Stop worrying about who's watching and start focusing on who you're becoming. It's easy to chase trends, mimic others, and seek the spotlight. But real value is built in the shadows. It's built when nobody's clapping, when nobody's reposting you, when nobody sees the grind. That's where character is formed. That's where value is developed. And when you emerge from that place, you won't have to ask people to recognize your worth. They'll feel it. That's where your worth will recognize your worth. They'll feel it. Your results will speak for you. Your discipline will make the introduction before you even open your mouth. So here's the key. Stop making yourself easily accessible to prove you're worthy. Stop trying to fit in places where you have to shrink to be accepted. Stop chasing relationships that require you to abandon your value just to feel seen. Instead, start becoming the kind of person that commands respect, not with your words, but with your walk. When you shift your focus from availability to value, you move from desperation to distinction. You stop trying to be chosen and start realizing you've already been called. Let the fruit of your life be your evidence. Let your excellence speak louder than your explanations. Let your consistency say what your captions never could. Valuable people don't have to scream. They move in silence and produce results that echo for generations. And when you operate like that, you begin to influence not just circles, but systems. You shift atmospheres. You break cycles. You inspire others to rise. That's what happens when you stop chasing validation and start building value.